Once upon a time in the heart of Madrid, where history and modernity danced hand in hand under starlit skies, there existed barricades not made of stone or earth but born from hope and defiance against an encroaching shadow across Europe's sunny landscapes. It was here that our young protagonist found himself amidst the turmoil. A volunteer in the International Brigades with dreams as wide-eyed as they were bold, clutching his rifle close like a lifeline to freedom and joining forces against fascism's tide threatening to sweep away all he cherished. The air was thick with dust stirred up by passing feet, an unwelcome reminder of the struggle that lay ahead in every gusty breath, while distant echoes carried tales from battlefields afar and whispered promises back home unheeded amidst cacophony both foreign and familiar. Through crackling radio static and strained voices over desperate lines to Madrid's command center, through hushed conversations with fellow fighters sharing not only stories of valor, but also fear for the future, they fought so fiercely to protect her hero learned that hope was a double-edged sword, one side sharp enough to cut deep into his soul and another dull as it promised nothing. As twilight kisses day goodbye, our protagonist nestled within an improvised bunker carved out in the heart of Madrid's narrow streets, a refuge among ruins where once stood proud edifices that now bore witness to artillery fire with scars, like a map, etched into their facades. These architectural masterpieces held stories, histories layered upon one another through every chipped paint flake and bullet mark. Secrets sealed behind crumbling walls whispering tales of old glory days when the city thrived under different skeezer contrast to today's individual over liberty. In this setting, where each heartbeat seemed a drumroll announcing impending peril and every sigh echoed through emptied streets, long abandoned by their former residents who fled before fascism's advance, the faint strains of music drifted in from an open window nearby, a melancholic waltz played on worn strings that seemed to harmonize with raindrops tracing watercolors across cobblestone. A lone guitarist, perhaps a soldier himself, or maybe just seeking solace within the haunting beauty of his art amidst chaos, strummed gently as if he were trying not only to remember, but also to forget what war had become for him and those like our protagonist who stood guard over memories. Our young volunteer sat with a book half open, its pages fluttering lightly against the background of tension that threaded through every aspect of life within Madrid's embattled embrace. He could feel his fingers tracing lines written by those before him who had dreamt so fervently about democracy and social justice, or concept as fragile yet resilient in form like themselves against the oppressive ideology that sought to crush it beneath both heel. The very air seemed saturated with a history of resistance, one not just fought on battlefields, but within every human heart yearning for peace amidst strife. And here he was meant to stand firm beside his brethren in this noble cause of fight against division that seared deeper than the wounds upon their bodies. As night blanketed Madrid's sky, our protagonist found himself reflecting on what it truly meant to be a volunteer within these brigades, not just as an instrument of war, but also as someone yearning for understanding and empathy in equal measure among those he shared his trenches with. The ideals that had drawn him from afar were now mired by the divisions born out of political differences, ethnicity, language, each a barrier to solidarity within their ranks where once they stood united against tyranny's advance. And yet these same rifts could not be ignored when faced with fascism's relentless machinery. He understood that the fight for freedom was as much about healing those internal wounds as it was repelling an external force, a realization dawning upon him like a soft, uncertain light in times of darkness. And within this paradoxical revelation lay his purpose entwined with every soul around him. For though the battle raged on both inside their hearts and out before them under Madrid's watchful eyes that had seen centuries rise from ashes to bloom against, his young volunteer knew well enough it was not just fascism they sought to defeat, but also fear, ignorance, division itself. The moon rose higher into the night sky as a gentle breeze carried whispers of conversations from our protagonist's earshot, each word weaving through his thoughts like silken threads that promised both comfort and pain in their embrace. He had come to understand that beneath every soldier's uniform was an individual soul or heart pulsating with fears as much about the future they could not shape for themselves against fascism's looming specter, but also a past riddled with conflicts within his own community back home in Madrid, where lines drawn by ideology had torn families and friends apart. In this chapter of our story, we delve deeper into Antonio's journey as he navigates the complexities that surround him both physically on the battlefield and mentally amidst internal strife within his brigade. Once a young man full of hope for change through unity in Spain against oppressive forces abroad, he now stood at a crossroads where ideals clashed with reality like waves upon Madrid's ancient shores during stormy nights. The city had seen its share of uprisings and revolutions which were as much about internal reforms for justice. Antonio found solace in writing, penning letters to his sister Lucia back home amidst their shared struggle, or letter he knew she would never read due to her absence caused by the political turmoil that had already separated them before Warsaw crept upon Madrid's cobblestone streets. His missive was filled with tales of camaraderie, but also his fears and uncertainties about their fight against fascism, for he knew too well how easy it became to forget the humanity within each other when driven by ideologies, fervor, or hatred's bitter taste from across borders. One evening after a long day of marching through muddy trenches, Antonio chanced upon an old soldier named Miguel who shared stories not just about their common enemy, but also reflections on the nature of brotherhood and human connection during wartime. These tales were punctuated by laughter that echoed in his heart, like memories long forgotten or time when differences did not divide, where he had seen a mosaic of faces from all walks come together as one entity against the encroaching threat to their liberties and way of life. Throughout these exchanges with Miguel, Antonio began crafting small acts that sowed seeds for unity within his ranks, organized gatherings where songs in different languages filled the air, or when they shared meals cooked from whatever rations were available, an attempt to bridge gaps created by fear and ignorance. These moments became rare sanctuaries of peace amidst chaos, teaching Antonio that even soldiers who had once been as divided could find common ground if given a chance, a poignant lesson about the fragile thread upon which human connection hung in times like these. As dawn approached on another day fraught with battles yet to come and enemies whose visages bore no reflection of their own city, Antonio realized that each time he reached out his hand across lines drawn not just by politics, but also histories intertwined, was stitching together a tapestry of humanity within the brigade. The realization dawned on him like light through mist. To fight fascism effectively meant first confronting and mending these internal wounds that had festered for generations, as much at home in Madrid's heartlands as it was across its divided frontiers against a common foe. He understood then the true meaning of his volunteering, not just standing arm in arm with fellow combatants, but also intertwining their spirits to create something resilient and beautiful amidst despair. In this chapter, we see Antonio's transformation from warrior intent on physical confrontation towards a leader who recognizes the power of healing wounds, both external and internal, a true testament that even in times where darkness loomed as vastly as Madrid's night sky could bear witness to dawn. For though his battles were never just about repelling an invader, they would always be rooted deeper within each soul fighting for freedom from fear itself. He knew then and there what lay ahead was a journey not of marching through trenches, but traversing the vast landscape of human empathy in Madrid's historic backdrop. Underneath an old oak in Plaza, marrow witness as timeless as the tales told beneath its boughs over centuries past, the brigade gathered on an evening when even the stars seemed reticent to twinkle, fearing their light might betray a hope too fragile for night. Antonio stood before them with humility that belied his stature within military ranks. He spoke not of tactics or orders, but shared visions drawn from threads spun by memory and soul's yearning or tapestry to mend, intertwining each thread into a stronger weave against the coming days. The oak's shade became their haven as Antonio recounted narratives of Madrid that had embraced pain yet bloomed with resilience, stories where adversity was not merely met, but transformed through human connection and empathy, a concept foreign to many. They were accustomed to viewing conflict. The brigade listened, wrapped in the warmth spread by Antonio's words, as he spoke of a time when music flowed freely from cafes into moonlit streets, where artists painted not only landscapes, but emotions that transcended language and ideology. Madrid united under an ethos forged through shared experiences. As we stand here, ready to meet our common enemy, Antonio began in a tone both earnest and gentle, we must also acknowledge the other foes within us. Fears born of pain from years past that seek refuge not only on foreign shores, but deep within our own spirits. He paused for effect. The brigade exchanged glances, a sea change stirring as they contemplated their internal battlefields, often overlooked beneath boots and bayonets. In the dimming light of daybreak, to follow night's endless watch, Antonio unveiled a plan not dissimilar from his earlier revelations. He proposed forming groups that would delve into Madrid's cultural heartbeat communities, where each individual could share their story and listen with empathy. These gatherings aimed at weaving the personal narratives of loss and longing, creating an environment for mutual understanding to thrive within shared silence and gaze. Antonio envisioned these circles as places not only of healing but education, or place where history's lessons were imparted by those who lived through its most tumultuous chapters, the youngest among them eyes wide with unburdened curiosity, while their elders stood firmly in resolve to pass on wisdom and courage. Here they would discover that within each other lay not just comrades, but an intricate network of human resilience, a sole thread essential for completing this tapestry Antonio sought so desperately to create against the backdrop of war's grey horizon. As sunlight peeked through caf windows and dappled across plazas, signaling another day's promise amidst turmoil, Antonio felt his heart swell with a sense of purpose far greater than military conquest could ever provide. A leader who understood the true essence of unity lay in acknowledging one's own vulnerabilities. His brigade might still stand as guardians against oppression, but now carried within them an ember that glowed brightest when kindled by shared humanity, their actions guided not just by patriotism's call, but the compassion of understanding souls, mending wounds with gentle words and open arms. For Antonio knew well this journey would be arduous. Madrid's shadows were long yet full of life, a city where past triumphs lay hidden beneath modern scars, awaiting rediscovery through a collective embrace that could only fortify them against the impending trials ahead. His brigade was no longer just warriors, but guardians at heart, who had begun to see themselves as custodians of their own humanity and Spain's storied legacy, or people poised not merely on defense, but a renaissance that would emerge from beneath Madrid's veiled night sky. In the days following this pivotal meeting under an oaken plaza, the following day broke with a hesitant sun, as if uncertain to rise above an unsettled land. Antonio looked upon his brigade, their faces no longer marred by lines of worry, but instead etched in quiet determination and new-found resolve that promised change beyond the grasp of war's relentless hands. With each passing moment under Madrid's canopy, they seemed to transform an army once bound solely by duty, now united with a common thread woven from shared empathy, their hearts no longer just shields, but sanctuaries for one another. In the cool morning air that held whispers of history and hope alike, Antonio began his rounds among them. Each face he passed became more than sight, it was connection in its purest form, as if acknowledging shared scars could sew together frayed spirits into a tapestry robust enough to withstand any tempest. "We will not only stand against oppression," Antonio murmured under his breath, "but also uplift one another. It is our unwavering spirit that shall carry us through." His voice trailed off as he glanced at the children playing in a nearby square. Their laughter echoed like music amidst cannons and muskets. For Antonio knew these were not just soldiers, but beings capable of joy, and even within this turmoil there was room for lightness to dwell amongst shadows cast by impending trials. As the day marched on, a sense of solemn festivity enveloped them all. They shared stories over meager rations and celebrated their past as liberators with dances in cobblestone alleyways where history whispered tales between each stone-laid lineage, a reverent nod to Madrid's heartbeat that had once pulsed through revolution. Antonio led them back, his eyes reflecting the twilight promise of unity as they returned one by one from their gatherings, not just with a shield raised high, but also an arm outstretched in camaraderie, a silent testament to each soul's readiness for whatever darkness might loom. That night saw stars obscured and hearts fuller than ever before as Antonio gathered his brigade once more beneath the oak that had borne witness to their awakening. His voice, soft yet unwavering in its cadence, spoke of a future wherein they would not just protect, but also heal our nation's soul, mending itself through shared resilience and compassion, as brightly burning within them all as the first light that dared to challenge night. He reminded them gently yet firmly, "Our battlefields will be here, in these very streets where our ancestors fought for freedom, but now they were not just soldiers, Their mission had evolved into a guardianship of humanity's flame or promise to safeguard the essence that made them more than protectors. As dawn approached once again with its tentative rays, Antonio knew he had lit in his brigade an ember fueled by understanding and unity. They were no longer just a fighting force, but keepers of their collective humanity, a beacon forged from the melding of past valor and present compassion. In this land where time held its breath, Antonio's words became seeds to sprout within his brigade's spirit. Let us rise as one, not just in defense, but also with a reawakening heart, a rebirth that will make history honor our names. With each soldier listening intently and nodding along the path of resolve, they understood their duty extended beyond mere combat. They were to be stewards of culture itself, warriors for peace wielded not by weapons but through deeds done, with hearts full as much as strong sinews or brigade, becoming a brotherhood interwoven in humanity's resilient fabric that stretched across time and space into the very soul of Spain. As night embraced Madrid, it seemed to whisper ancient lullabies through its veils, cradling Antonio's beloved city with promises of dawn or testament, not only to survival, but also flourishing amid adversities that sought to quell their indomitable spirit forged in unity. And so the brigade stood ready under Madrid's watchful eyes as they turned into sentinels, guardians now both against darkness and champions of lighter people poised not merely on defense but a future where resilience danced with compassionate hearts beating stronger than ever before. They were no longer just warriors. Antonio's brigade had become custodians at heart for the legacy they carried within them once upon a time in another chapter of Antonio's tale. Chapter 5 unfolded as such, as dawn kissed the horizon, painting it with hues that whisper promises to those who believe it, or promise not just for peace, but also prosperity and renewal. People began their daily rituals. The once quiet streets echoed softly now. Children played in laughter as if nothing had ever weighed upon them before this day of unparalleled resolve, while elders shared stories that intertwined personal memories with the history they were part of crafting together. In the heart of Madrid's main square stood a makeshift altar where Antonio and his brigade would gather each morning to offer thanks for their blessings, a simple ceremony enveloped in gratitude, strengthening their spirit as surely as it did any soldier's arm. This day was no different. Eyes brimming with hope gazed upon the symbol of unity that lay before them, a tapestry woven from threads representing every single member's heritage and dream for Spain, or living testament to diversity celebrated within their ranks, each strand as crucial to its beauty. Antonio felt his heart swell with pride at this sight. The altar was not only where they paid respect, but also offered a constant reminder of what unity could achieve against all odds. It became evident that every soldier carried an invisible armor forged from their collective dream, shielding them even in moments when fear threatened to consume hope's flame within. This strength stemmed directly from the shared belief they held. Through resilience and compassionate hearts working hand in hand with unwavering courage, a brighter future was not just possible, it was imminent for their nation. As days turned into weeks since that fateful night when Antonio vowed to protect his people's legacy of harmony, as much as they fought against the encroaching darkness outside Madrid's gates, each soldier had found a purpose beyond themselves, or even within one another. It was about safeguarding the rich tapestry of human connection and heritage that made up Spain. Their battles no longer seemed distant skirmishes, but rather acts of preserving their shared past as much as they secured their present against external threats, for in each other's eyes lay a reflection not just of comrades in arms, but also kinfolk intertwined by history and fate under the same sky. The city itself seemed to resonate with this sentiment. Cafes opened early as locals shared tales over steaming cups, while markets buzzed busily preparing for what festivities might come next, or testament that life was not merely going on but thriving amidst the uncertainty. Artists and poets found inspiration in their fellow citizens' unwavering spirit to create works reflective of this era's essence, echoes of courage laced within each brushstroke, and verse dedicated as much to future generations as they were a salute to Antonio's brigade standing vigilant. 3 the morning sun crested its zenith high above, casting down golden light upon soldiers who now knew their role was not solely one of warriors, but also custodians and protectors of humanity's most precious treasury, their united spirit that defied time. Antonio stood before his brigade once more under the open sky, It felt as though he could see into each soldier's soul, recognizing not only their transformation from mere fighters to custodians, but also acknowledging how deeply this role was entwined in every heart beating within that circle of brothers and sisters. Within his brigade's spirit, let us rise as one, not just in defense, but also with a reawakening heart of rebirth that will make history honor our names. With each soldier listening intently and nodding along the path of resolve, they understood their duty extended beyond mere combat. They were to be stewards of culture itself, warriors for peace wielded not by weapons but through deeds done, with hearts full as much as strong sinews or brigade, becoming a brotherhood interwoven in humanity's resilient fabric that stretched across time and space into the very soul of Spain. As night embraced Madrid, it seemed to whisper ancient lullabies through its veils, cradling Antonio's beloved city with promises of dawn or testament, not only to survival, but also flourishing amid adversities that sought to quell their indomitable spirit forged in unity. And so the brigade stood ready under Madrid's watchful eyes as they turned into sentinels, guardians now as Antonio watched his city's silhouette against this new day. He knew within each brick and cobblestone lay stories waiting to be told, stories that needed voices like their own in order not only to survive, but also thrive amid the tempests of change they faced together as a united front. The call had been made at nightfall by Antonio's commanding voice, reverberating through the quiet streets and finding its way into every heart within earshot. Let us rise as one, not just in defense, but also with our spirits reborn. It was more than an order, it became a mantra that each soldier carried back to their beds. Now, on this bright day, they moved as if the very essence of unity coursed through them like lifeblood. Their mission transcended beyond combat. It embraced every facet and cornerstone of society wherein culture was interwoven with resilience, their brigade becoming a brotherhood that reached into humanity's core, ensuring the fabric remained unbroken even as empires rose and fell around them. Antonio's heart swelled knowing his men stood ready to protect more than just their own lives. They were guardians of culture itself, warriors for peace armed with compassion that flowed from a wellspring within, nurtured by the shared love amongst brothers in arms and sisters. As Antonio led them forth in silence before breaking into soft cheers when he saluted his men one final time at dawn's cusp, it was clear they understood their role to be much more than that of fighters. Each step forward echoed with the promise of safeguarding legacies and histories. Their path wove through Madrid's streets, as if by instinct, an ancient dance between protection and preservation played out upon a modern stage where every cafe, corner, market stall, library, archive held significance in their sacred mission to protect culture from the ravages of time or tyranny alike. They moved with purposeful poise that belied an inner calm born not just of training but camaraderie and shared solar brotherhood bonded by more than allegiance. It was a communion, one where each soldier's heartbeat synchronized to the rhythm of collective humanity. As they traversed through Plaza Mayor with purposeful strides, their presence seemed almost spectral in its ethereal harmony, and echo from another time when city squares were places not just for congregation but celebrations and commemoration as well, where every stone told tales of joyous revelry intermingled seamlessly now with the somber duties they bore. They paused before a historic monument, its visage weathered by centuries, yet proudly upright, or guardian to history in itself, that stood testament to resilience and survival through countless seasons of suns risen only once, then set again for ages untold. It was here the brigade would stand watch. Today, we are not mere soldiers, Antonio spoke into his communication device as they took their positions around this silent sentinel. We are protectors and keepers of stories that must never be silenced, of culture that demands to live on through our actions. His voice was a quiet raw for the cause. The brigade's watch would not only serve in times when shadows threatened their beloved city, but also as they engaged with communities, sharing tales and traditions from every corner of Spain's expanse, wherein each word spoken or acted upon became part of an ongoing narrative that the next generation might carry forth. They understood too well how fragile this world could be. Their resolve was a bulwark against those forces intent on erasing what had come before, ensuring not just survival but growth and flourishing in diversity's embracer brigade, intertwined with the soul of Spain as they became custodians for centuries to follow. As Antonio looked upon his men arrayed like an oak's roots beneath him, he whispered a vow that would transcend time itself. Let this be our legacy. Let us guard not just lives, but heritage with the same fervor. In their unity and shared purpose, as Antonio's last words echoed in his mind like a sacred mantra against oblivion, he felt an unexplained weight lift from his heart, a promise to safeguard more than just lives, but also stories and traditions that wove the very essence of their home. The brigade's watch had become not only about defending this city under siege. It was a testament to resilience in diversity, ensuring growth amidst adversities while embracing cultural wealth as they marched forward into an uncertain horizon. With the sun setting on another day of tireless efforts and unwavering spirit, Antonio watched over his soldiers through nightfall, or sentinel against time itself. The brigade's ranks had grown in strength since their vow was made. Each new recruit carried with them not only a weapon, but also the legacy they were meant to protect. In this city of art and history, where cobblestone streets whispered tales from centuries past beneath boots that now marched defiantly upon its heartstrings, Antonio's men moved like guardians through an invisible fortress built by their shared heritage, or living museum they were determined to preserve. As the brigade patrolled under a blanket of stars and moonlight, whispers traveled from one comrade's lips to another about folklore that had been passed down generations in hushed reverence during quiet nights by campfires. Stories spoke of ancient heroes who fought not with swords, but wit against overwhelming darkness, a reflection on how their own battles were no less than legendary, forged through the unyielding strength that comes from protecting one's roots and values amidst encroaching shadows. One night, as they gathered in hushed tones around a flickering campfire under zero-canopied trees near an ancient monastery, Antonio shared tales of his ancestors, fighters for truth, who stood against oppressive forces, seeking to erase history with their ignorance and greed. These were the stories that bound them together. They served as a beacon guiding through perilous nights when fear tried to seep into cracks in resolve, reminding each other of Spain's resilience, as their people's ability to endure hardships while holding on to hope and unity. The brigade was not merely soldiers. They were the carriers of stories that shaped their national identity through ages past. Tales woven into songs, sung in taverns, chanted by bards on street corners during festivals under moonlit skies, are cultural heritage as vibrant and enduring as Spain itself. As Antonio listened to his men share these narratives, he felt an unbreakable chain of continuity from their ancestors, echoes through the very sinew in their arms that held rifles, steady on guard posts, or stood tall during confrontations with foes who sought not just territorial claims, but also cultural dominance. In every act, every defensive maneuver, strategic decision made at dawn's first light to repel an enemy's advance against the backdrop of a city that had been both witness and victim through countless chapters in history, the brigade was performing not just military duties, but also enacting cultural preservation. They stood firmly as bulwarks within their own community, where every gesture held significance for those who looked upon them with gratitude or fear. They were guardians of more than the physical realm alone. Through days and nights that blurred into one another in a relentless cycle of duty, intertwined with cultural expression, the brigade lived out an existence where history was not just remembered but actively practiced, embedded within each movement as they marched to the rhythm set by their forebears. They were custodians who had vowed to honor and uphold a legacy that extended beyond mere survival. It encompassed nurturing an environment where diversity could flourish without fear of being overwritten or forgotten. As Antonio stood tall, his silhouette against the horizon like one from ancient frescoes, or guardian not just in flesh but also spirit and purpose, knew that this brigade was more than a military unit. They were an embodiment of cultural resilience itself. They would be remembered as protectors who safeguarded Spain's soul, ensuring its stories continued to resonate through time with the same vigor displayed on those streets beneath his watchful gaze, the very essence of their home now intertwined indelibly into each other's being and identity. With dawn approaching once more upon this city that had become both battleground, as Antonio gazed upon his reflection in a nearby puddle after nights of vigilance that felt like centuries, he allowed himself one final moment before retiring for precious respite to connect with more than just duty and guardianship, but also the essence within him. The brigade had been an extension of his own heartbeat. They were not merely soldiers marching in formation or practicing drills, though such tasks defined their existence as much as any other aspect did they formed a tapestry woven from threads of history and identity that Antonio honored with every breath. The following morning greeted the city like an old friend, whispering secrets only to be heard in hushed reverence by those who knew its tales well enough to feel their weight on shoulders as much as hear them echo through cobblestone streets where generations had walked before Antonio and his brothers in arms. The dawn chorus of birdsong seemed at times a counterpoint to the silent prayers for peace that slipped into Antonio's mind, carried forward by memories of nightly watches, when fear could not find him, not even on those rare occasions where shadows sought to mimic his silhouette against heritage-laden walls. The city was a living museum. Its architecture held stories etched in every weathered stone and creaking doorway, with frescoes that whisper of festivals, long past vibrant depictions where dancers moved as if painted by the brushstrokes of history itself. Antonio's brigade walked these streets not just to perform their watch, but also in homage to a culture so rich and profound it felt like an anchor for his soul, keeping him tethered amid life's tempests that often sought to unmoor even the strongest of spirits from tradition's steadfast grasp. As Antonio paced towards today's meeting Pointer Plaza, where once a marketplace teemed with voices and laughter now served as their encampment during these uncertain times when Spain's heartbeat seemed to falter under external pressures that sought not just dominion, but also dilution of its cultural core, the brigade stood shoulder to shoulder, an unbroken lineage where the past was a guiding lantern for their present and future endeavor, legacy carried forth through each step they took together as one entity, with many souls within it. Their commander had always emphasized that true strength lay not in armaments or martial prowess, but rather in unity, resilience of spirit, and unwavering loyalty to the essence of who they were, the embodiment of a people whose roots delved deep into earth's memory. It was this very commander's belief that had guided Antonio through years when others might have succumbed not just to physical battles, but also ideological sieges, where their most potent weapon against erasure and oppression would be the unyielding preservation of identity itself. As he approached his comrades, who now gathered with an air of solemnity that betokened a day unlike any other own, foretold by whispers carried on winds across distant lands to come, where men spoke not only in tones, but also through actions imbued with intention and consequence. Antonio felt the weight of tomorrow's expectations pressing upon his chest as he greeted them one last time before nightfall, when they would march once more under cover of darkness towards another day's unknown trials, where history was not just a backdrop, but also an active participant in their journey. The brigade had been through the cycle since Antonio first donned his armor, as young men are perpetual ebb and flow between celebration and sacrifice that defined them more than any written decree or royal edict could command of loyalty from mere subjects. They were not just soldiers. They carried within their ranks a sacred trust to be guardians, stewards of the flame whose light had illuminated paths through darkest nights, a commitment as old as Spain itself, and one that Antonio knew would continue long after his own chapter in its history came due. With each sunset's descent, like amber dye into waterways flowing towards horizons yet to be charted, the brigade felt not just a sense of duty, but also an intrinsic call or divine whisper reminding them that their true charge was more profound than mere survival. They were custodians, charged with preserving and nurturing the fertile ground from which Spain's cultural garden grew. They needed to tend it as one might care for a cherished heirloom passed down through generations, ensuring its beauty did not fade, but only as dusk settled upon the land like a velvet shroud. Antonio and his brigade found themselves in contemplation beneath an expansive sky that bore witness to their unwavering resolve. For centuries past, her tapestry of stars began to emerge as silent sentinels. The cool evening breeze carried whispers from far-off lands where the echoes of their ancestors' footsteps lingered, and Antonio felt a profound sense of continuity that transcended time within his breastbone. The very essence of Spain coursed through him as they camped under the canopy of history. The day had been long. Battles raged on with fury unbridled across fields where once mighty armies clashed. Yet now their steeds lay still and silent beneath moon's indifferent gaze. Antonio remembered stories his grandfather used to recount tales that seemed as much a part of him as the blood in his veins or the earth underfoot. The brigade was more than just an assembly. They were bearers of legacy, entrusted with safeguarding tales spun from courage and despair alike against forgetfulness's insidious creep, as night's embrace tightened around them like a comforting shawl woven by invisible hands. Antonio shared these thoughts with his men eyes that held the wisdom of ages flickering in their depths, as they listened intently to each word spoken from the soul of a leader whose heart beat in unison with Spain's own. They understood now more than ever what it meant to be custodians, not just warriors tasked with defending borders, but also preservers of culture and heritage that had been their birthright since time immemorial. The brigade gathered around the crackling fire as embers danced like flames in an unseen aurora, living testament to shared warmth against encroaching coldness, both meteorological and met-at-zero oracle. They spoke of home, not just a place but a concept that lived within their chests whenever they beheld the beauty around them, from rugged mountains kissed by sunlight at dawn's first blush to rolling green plains where rivers whispered secrets only understood when waters flow freely unburdened. Antonio felt his heart swell with pride for this sacred trust to be guardians of a legacy not written on parchment, but inscribed in the very spirit that animated Spain's endless march forward through ages, both golden and sombre alike. He knew well enough that their duty was eternal, as perpetual as history itself. It would outlive them all to become an unbroken chain of guardianship stretching into futures unknown, and he were but links in this infinite spiral wherein every end is simply a new beginning for those who follow afterward with eyes wide open and hearts brimming full enough to hold the world's weight. As night deepened its hues, Antonio looked upon his brigade one last time before sleep claimed the mad brotherhood united by purpose beyond survival. They were custodians of a treasure trove more valuable than any tangible riches ever sought after on foreign soils, the very soul of Spain. With this realization nestled firmly in their collective consciousness, Antonio could rest easy knowing that while his chapter may have reached its conclusion under these same stars where countless others would begin, a new generation stood ready to inherit and perpetuate a legacy as enduring as time itself, for they were not merely soldiers, but the living embodiment of Spain's ceaseless heartbeat. And so, with gentle assurance that their chapter in this grand narrative had come full circle from seedling armor-clad youth to wise elder cradled by twilight's tender embrace, Antonio surrendered his form unto the earth beneath him and drifted into dreams where every memory was not just a recollection but an eternal flame guiding them onward through cycles of darkness towards dawn's unfailing promise. His spirit, now intertwined with those he had led before as well as all who would come after, they were together in the realm beyond waking hours, where every heartbeat resonated like a drum echoed across vast expanses. They felt not just duty but love for their sacred charge, and knew that though one might pass, another's chapter was always ready to unfold beneath heaven's watchful gaze. As the first light of dawn began its ascent over distant peaks casting hues reminiscent of a painter lost in reverie, Antonio would wake reborn with renewed purpose. For he and his brigade were not just soldiers, but cussed in Chapter 10, as Antonio's brigade gathered around the fire that night after many battles had been fought and won under their steadfast leadership. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for his men's loyalty and valor, sentiment echoed in the kind-hearted eyes before him. It was here, at this moment, surrounded by the silent witnesses of ancient trees that stood guard around them like sentinels from a world long passed into legend. They decided to erect an altar dedicated to their forebears who had braved similar paths and perils with unwavering courage. The next morning at dawn's first light, Antonio led his men in solemn procession towards the site chosen by old General Esteban, a place where generations before them laid down arms as tokens of peace amidst turmoil. It was not only a testament to their heritage, but also an invitation for continued courage and unity beyond this life. The altar, adorned with olive branches representing the enduring spirit of Spain itself, were symbols that Antonio felt would inspire his men as much in death as they did upon entering battle. It was a physical manifestation of their love for country and comradeship which had kept them unbroken through trials. As he stood before this altar, the soft murmur of history's whispers seemed to wrap around him like an embrace, echoes of ancestral footsteps in the Spanish lands that stretched from Granada's proud walls where once Almohads had sought refuge against invaders. They were a reminder he was but one link in this chain. Antonio felt his heart swell with pride, for though it ached to see so many of them depart on journeys beyond the mortal coil, knew that their spirit would continue as surely as Spain's own rivers flow into the sea. They were part of a legacy too grand not even time could erode. Antonio's fingers traced over each name inscribed upon marble, feeling for just one amongst them who had returned to guide this new guard through tempests, yet unseen, these names now resting here in solemn remembrance. He knew that while some may be gone from the earthly realm, their spirits would forever watch over his men. He imparted a final blessing upon those still with him, and urged them to live lives of honor as worthy legacies could endure beyond one's own tenure on this plane. They were but humble custodians in the grand tapestry that time wove, yet each thread was vital. As he departed from his beloved brigade, and turned towards homeward-bound journeys or quiet retirements that their spirits would interlace with those of past and future warriors, Antonio felt a surge through him as if an ancestral heartbeat propelled this transition forward in the cycle. He understood now that every sunset was but a prelude to another dawn. Each man's legacy, like seeds sowed into eternity's fertile soil, were not merely soldiers. They carried within them the very essence of their nation across ages, and stories, untold yet deeply embedded in its soul. Upon his return home that evening, as twilight crept upon a world paused to honor him, he found solace at an ancient cathedral, where countless others had sought refuge during times both bright and dark. Within those hallowed walls was the silent acknowledgment of many such farewells before. The flickering candlelight danced on his face, as if paying homage. Antonio knew that though he might not see all who fought beside him again, their collective soul would forever be immortalized within these stone confines. They were a continuum of valor and devotion to which each generation contributed its verse. As the night deepened into profound contemplation, Antonio felt an ancient comfort in knowing that his spirit was not alone amongst those revered hereafter, for all who had given their lives or departed from this world were forever interwoven within it. They continued to resonate with every heartbeat and whisper of the wind through leaves. In these sacred spaces where history's soul converged, found himself at peace as one chapter closed on his own life, for he was reborn anew each day upon waking by a rising sun that promised renewal. Antonio felt it within him to carry forward this eternal flame of their shared heritage. So when the first light began its gentle ascent over distant peaks, casting hues reminiscent of those days lost in reverie, as their essence was captured not just on paper or stone, but imprinted upon his in chapter 11 of his narrative journey through time and memory, Antonio found himself wandering once more beneath the ancient olive trees that had borne witness to countless seasons around this very spot within the quarter place, where history seemed as much a part of him now as it was an integral thread in the tapestry woven by his people. The air carried whispers from generations past, and Antonio felt their presence more keenly with each step he took on the sun-warmed cobblestones that lined his path back home to bed after such a reflective sojourn into history's embrace at nightfall's hour. Antonio began by tracing outlines in the soil, where old roses still bloomed defiantly amidst weeds, her silent testament to resilience and beauty persisting through time, much like his own spirit after enduring life's vicissitudes. His fingertips brushed against coarse stone beneath a weathered marble statue that had stood sentinel for ages, bearing the inscription of an ancestor who served faithfully with those hallowed walls in yesteryear's forgotten battlesome man whose valor Antonio felt echo within his own heart. The courtyard was dappled by sunlight piercing through foliage that had seen many winters, casting patterns upon the ground like transient constellations across a terrestrial skyline. These were no mere trees, but ancient guardians of history, themselves stalwart and unyielding. The air smelled faintly of olive oil mixed with damp earth as Antonio paused to admire an old fresco on one wall. The colors, still vibrant despite years spent in silent observation since its creation by hand, it depicted a family resemblance he could see within himself, a lineage proud and enduring. Antonio's thoughts often drifted, as they did now, to his own grandmother, who'd regaled him with tales of the past, her voice imbuing each memory with warmth like sunlight through stained glass windows. She had been a seamstress skilled in crafting garments that reflected stories woven into every thread or legacy Antonio aimed to honor as he passed it down. He closed his eyes for just a moment, allowing the symphony of nature's sounds, and rustling leaves around him seemed like an orchestra playing on perpetual repeat. Birdsong was but one note in this grand composition that played across all times since before recorded history began. Her melody Antonio felt tapping within. In his heart grew a quiet resolve as he pondered the lives of those who'd once called these walls home, and how their love for country had been kindled by shared dreams beneath this very canopy. It was here that young lovers professed vows echoing in eternity. Antonio felt an affinity with such passionate souls. Their ardor seemed to resonate within his own chest when he thought of the matriarch who'd lovingly embraced him upon each return from battles far beyond these ancient ramparts. She had been a beacon, guiding and sustaining. As Antonio approached homeward towards slumber's inevitable call, her gentle breeze carried scents of the sea mingling with an earthy undertone that evoked memories not unlike those he'd gathered this evening. It was as if each breath whispered tales yet untold, secrets buried beneath layers of dirt and time. He thought fondly on his father's words when Antonio had been a boy. History is the bedrock upon which our future stands. These sacred spaces where history's soul converged were not just about remembrance, but also an anchor for tomorrow, or promise as constant as morning tide kissing shore. Antonio paused to drink deeply from his well-worn leather satchel, retrieving a handful of seeds entrusted upon him by the matriarch. They were rare olives that bore no fruit, but promised growth, non-effacelser symbol for legacy and life anew sprouting forth. With reverence he scattered them in between ancient stones, as if sowing future histories amongst past ones, each seed a silent testament to cycles of loss and renewal inherent within this land's embrace. Antonius Unfold was but one thread among many that wove the fabric binding his people across ages. The courtyard had always been more than just soil beneath footsteps or walls encasing history. It represented a sanctuary where souls intermingled and lingered, even beyond physical death. It felt like coming home to embrace these silent companions once again. As the horizon blushed, Antonio took a deep breath and let it go, like he was exhaling dreams into the night sky above him, which held secrets as ancient as time itself. The stars twinkled knowingly back to his weary eyes. He had watched over this land since its very first dawn. It wasn't just any courtyard that Antonio stood in. It was a sacred ground where echoes of the past danced with whispers of tomorrow, and he felt as if he were part of an eternal narrative stretching beyond his own lifeline into infinity. As night deepened its embrace around him, Antony's heart swelled with love for this place, or cradle where stories lay snugly within the folds of history itself, and futures yet to be sown were taking root in every crevice and corner that held memories like treasures. The air was cooling down. Gentle breezes carried a scent, both bitter with decay and sweet as new beginnings, or duality present only on this hallowed ground where life ebbed and flowed through generations of souls intertwined within the earth's embrace. Tonight was no ordinary night. Antonio had come here carrying a burden, not his own secrets, but rather seeds that held promises to sprout histories yet untold, fragments from time capsules entrusted upon him by hands now at rest in eternal slumber within this very courtyard. They were olives unlike any other. Their fruitless branches bore the potential for life, growth, and rebirth of traditions long thought to be withered away into mere tales told during twilight hours, when shadows grew longer than reason would allow one's mind to accept as truth. With reverence in his heart and hands, steady despite age weighing upon him like the sands slipping through an hourglass, Antonio began planting these seeds between stones that had seen countless sunsets come into being before mankind even dared mark time with numbers or names. They were silent witnesses to history's relentless march forward. Each stone in this courtyard was a keeper of tales. Some spoke only when the setting sun kissed their surfaces, casting flickering shadows upon Antonio's face as he worked by moonlight that filtered through cracks and crevices left untouched since days before his grandfather's time. He imagined himself not just sowing seeds, but also planting dream zones where the community thrived on respect for this land, their legacy woven into every aspect of life as intricately thread by silk spun from an endless loom that history itself had masterfully crafted. This courtyard wasn't just a place. It was part and parcel of Antonio's own story, a chapter written in the language spoken only here, where each stone sighed with tales passed down through whispers on wind-carried leaves rustling against aged Kabbalist 053E. His fingers moved as if guided by spirits invisible to those who did not understand this land's subtle magics that coursed beneath the surface of every living thing, connecting them all in a silent symphony conducted since creation itself began its ever-unfolding melody. He planted his seeds with hope they would one day echo through time like ripples spread by stones cast into an unfathomably deep lake. As Antonio worked under the watchful gaze of celestial guardians, night's mantle grew heavier around him until it felt as if he were folding himself within its embracer, cloak woven from darkness and starlight alike that would shield his dreams when slumber came calling. He was content to let the courtyard wrap itself into a protective cocoon, ensuring these sacred spaces remained untouched by time's greedy hands, lest they desecrate what had been entrusted upon him as caretaker of legacies, both old and newborn alike, with promise that here within this hallowed ground lay not just history, but also the potential for tomorrow's roots to grow deep into fertile pastures. In every seed sown, Antonio found a fragmented piece of his soul repurposed. He was sowing more than olive trees amid ancient stones, was planting hope in hearts that had forgotten how their own lives were but threads within the grand tapestry of existence here upon this sacred earth. With each stone nudged aside, it felt as if history itself nodded its approval for Antonio to continue his silent dialogue with time. He knew not whether these seeds would sprout or remain dormant until a future generation was ready for their potential. As Antonio descended from his solitary vigil by the ancient olive groves that caressed the edge of history, he felt a gentle touch upon his shoulder, a surprise visitor in this revered space where time seemed to stand still under nature's watchful gaze. It was Eleanor, her eyes reflecting twilight hues and carrying with them an air both mystical and comfortingly familiar. She had returned after many moons apart from the world beyond these sacred grounds. Their meeting beneath a canopy of stars felt like destiny unfolding, or serendipitous reunion that Antonio could not ignore nor deny, as if their souls were bound by an invisible thread spun across time and space to meet once more within this cocooned sanctuary. As they embraced, the cool night air whispered secrets of past encounters through rustling leaves and murmuring brooks that danced around them in celebratory reverie, symphony for those willing to listen with their hearts rather than merely hear with their ears. The courtyard's embrace was not just a physical cloak, but an emotional refuge, where Antonio found the strength he needed after years of solitude and guardianship that left him feeling both isolated yet profoundly connected in ways unfathomable to those outside the sacred space. As their conversation flowed like water over pebble smooth with repetition yet always fresh, Antonio recounted tales not just from his time as a caretaker, but also the personal odysseys that led him back here, where every echo and shadow held stories of joyous beginnings and heart-wrenching farewells. Elena listened intently, her presence weaving into Antonio's narrative like threads interlacing in a tapestry rich with the hues of shared histories that span Lifit zero spans, but always circled back to this eternal point where humanity's stories could be cradled and cherished. As they spoke, memories began stirring within Antonio like dormant seeds awakened by tales untold, a resurgence of life as he recounted the arrival of a young couple who had once stood in this very spot on their wedding day. Now, centuries later, only his voice could summon back that era's vitality. The night deepened around them like velvet curtain upon stage, and time continued its steady march without pause or question, unlike within these hallowed grounds, where each heartbeat was a note in the chorus of eternity. Antonio led Eleanor through forgotten corridors veiled by ivy, guiding her to hidden altars adorned with relics that whispered prayers from ages past and echoes of footfalls long since quieted under dust's tender shroud, a reverent pilgrimage for souls seeking the whispers of yesteryears. The courtyard became their shared canvas, where they painted together in strokes both deliberate and spontaneous. Every step was a brushstroke on earthen hues that stretched into infinity, while each breath released scents woven from blooming lilacs to ancient cedars, or sensory banquet for the spirit seeking solace amidst ruins of time. They found themselves at an overgrown arbor, its vines like delicate fingers curling around sculptures that bore witness to forgotten loves and timeless passions. Here was a garden where nature had claimed her due as caretaker, living legacy in the arms of Antonio's tender stewardship. As dawn approached with honeyed light, casting golden threads through the leaves, Elena confessed how she too felt drawn back to this place that cradled their stories like a mother's womb holds her children before they are ready for birth, of sacred space where past and future meld in present moments. Antonio's heart ached with gratitude as he realized his vigil was not solitary confinement, but shared solace. The courtyard had always been both cradle and crucible, a place to nurture seeds of hope for those who might yet walk its paths before him in time's relentless flow. With gentle hands that mirrored his own caretaking touch upon stone and soil alike, Antonio showed Elena where he had planted the first olive sapling, her silent guardian to watch over generations as they came and went like seasons of leaves falling from trees then returning anew with spring's promise. As she traced her fingers along its gnarled roots that stretched deep into earthy embrace, Antonio whispered words meant for the wind yet felt profoundly personal. As dawn's first light painted strokes of gold across Antonio and Elena's garden sanctuary, they found themselves entrenched in a timeless conversation beneath the ancient olive tree that had stood witness to their love since its early days, when it was still just an acorn. The gentle hummingbird buzzes seemed like whispers from yesteryears, as if nature itself remembered every tender moment spent here, a testament to Antonio's belief in the living legacy of his stewardship, intertwined with Eleanor's presence and spirit within these hallowed grounds. "Eleanor," he began softly amidst a symphony of rustling leaves that played backdrop to their dialogue like notes on nature's own stringed instrument, "it is here where my heart found solace in your embrace." The words seemed as old and familiar as the grooves worn into his fingertips by years spent tending this plot. She sighed tenderly against her cheek, tracing a lineage of memories with gentle fingers that danced along Antonio's jawline, an unspoken promise to return again and nurture their love as consistently as he did his garden. It was in the honeyed light where she finally voiced what had been building within her. "Antonio, I feel like this place holds us all together." The couple stood side by side amidst rows of vibrant flora and fauna that seemed to respond with a quiet acknowledgment of their shared sentiments. From the blooming foxgloves reaching upward, as if grasping for heavenly touch, to creeping ivy embracing stone walls in its verdurous tendrils, nature mirrored love's persistence and strength within this sacred space where past and future were forever entwined. As they walked further into the garden's heart, a place Antonio had lovingly restored from disarray to splendor when others might have left it for dead, Elena found herself drawn back here time after time like an echo that couldn't escape its saucered siren call of homecoming she could neither resist nor deny. Together they would find solace in the garden's embrace and each other as seasons ebbed and flowed around them, a constant amidst change, their love growing steadily like roots beneath soil that knew no winter's chill or summer's blaze of heat to disturb its hold on life. Throughout this journey across the gardens expands a path lined with roses as red and passionate as Elena herself, marigolds yellowed like aged parchment that held stories waiting in silent watchfulness within their petals, while lavender scents wafted through air holding whispers of tranquil nighttime prayers for the garden's future. Antonio led her to a secluded bench beneath an elder tree. Its wrinkled bark bore witnesses like tattoos on skin that told tales without words. Here was where their stories converged into one under this living legacy of care and tenderness Antonio had built around them both. "Here we sit," he said with a gentle smile touching his lips in tandem to the first rays piercing through leaves above atop history's shoulders, "looking out over landscapes that have shaped our very souls." His voice was but a whisper on this morning breeze as it carried their shared confessions beyond earshot. As Elena nestled closer into his side upon the bench, her body wrapped around him like vines encircling an ancient trellis, she felt her heart swell with gratitude for Antonio's love that had always been a refuge from life's storms and trials. This garden was their sanctuary. Together they would continue to write chapters of hope upon the parchment of time, an unending story scribed in each touch, gaze, breath shared within these sacred bounds, where past loves had blossomed into future legacies yet unfolded before them as dawn embraced daylight's promise. And so they sat together beneath elders, watchful, aye, two hearts beating to the rhythm of timeless love that would continue to flourish here amidst olive, rose, and marigold, their garden a cradle for dreams yet born as surely as it had been one day after another. Here in this living chronicle where Antonio's hands continued their patient caretaking touch upon stone pathways worn by countless steps of lovers long past, but whose spirits whispered through the rustling leaves, Elena felt an irrevocable bond to her home or place that was and would as Antonio and Elena continued their shared confessions beneath the ancient olive tree that had stood sentinel over countless such meetings, each word they exchanged seemed to weave itself into a tapestry of everlasting devotion or gentle hum in the quietude. It was under this very canopy where Antonio first discovered Eleanor's laughter ringing through his heart like chimes on an unstirred sea breeze, her spirit as invigorating and unexpectedly warm as a sunrise over Tuscany's rolling hills. The garden around them was their shared solace. Its lush foliage had been tended by Antonio's careful hands since but fateful spring afternoon when he first laid eyes upon Elena, his heart caught in the brambles of new-found love. The roses and marigolds now bloomed with a vigor known only to plants nurtured through seasons, a reflection of their own enduring affection for one another. As they sat side by side on Antonio's cherished bench, hand-carved from the wood he had salvaged during his travels as an archaeologist in Greece, Eleanor's fingers sought and found warmth against his skin, a tactile reminder of their intertwined destinies. The roses whispered secrets to each other through rustling leaves, while Antonio's touch seemed like the only true language they understood, a symphony composed with every gentle stroke upon her back, an unspoken sonic penned in soft caresses that danced along her cheekbones and down into his pulsing temples. Their shared confessions had always been tenderly sequestered away from the world's prying ears, yet today felt differenters if a gentle zephyr carried their words to corners of the earth where they would never reach, but was not altogether unwelcome, for it brought with them an unforeseen promise. Antonio's voice barely rose above a sigh as he confessed his fear that beyond these hallowed grounds lay challenges and tempests yet unknown. Eleanor's response found him in the quietude of her embracer's sanctuary against uncertainty, echoing promises like ancient marble etched with vows forgotten by time. They were not alone as they confided their innermost thoughts into each other's souls, for it was a day where past loves and future Lever Zero Als seemed to converge at the heart of this sacred garden, beneath an elder's gaze that saw beyond lifetimes, an unending chronicle penned with love by hands both tender and wise. The olive tree had borne witness to their journey from its first saplings awakening in spring until it now offered shade over a pair of lovers whose roots were as deep within the earth itself, intertwined like vines among trellises wrought by hands long since stilled. The marigolds and roses stood sentinel around the man-living monument to days that stretched into years. Each bloom was an echo in their shared history of joyous laughter, tears wiped away with linen kissed by soaked suds at dawn's first light, the touching brushstrokes on canvas capturing moments where time seemed but a painter's whim. With every step they took along paths worn smooth over lifetimes of love and loss that had passed beneath. This very venture journey felt more through emotion than sighted steps upon stone cobbles laid by lovers who could no longer walk these grounds themselves, their spirits forever whispering in the rustling leaves like a chorus to Antonio's heartbeat. As twilight began its approach and painted amber hues across an endless sky above them, Elena wrapped her arms around her beloved's waist, her gesture of love as ceaselessly present as time itself within this garden where their spirits now dwelled in the quietude that only nightfall could bring. The stars began to emerge like countless silver drops from a celestial watering can, bathing them both in soft lunar luminescence, a reminder of dreams yet born and cradled safely within this living chronicle where Antonio's hands continued their patient caretaking touch upon the very essence that made up his world. Their shared confessions had always been a private rite, but tonight, as they sat together beneath elders' watchful iron, immutable sentinel of past and future loves alike, if gardens seemed to hum with energy and you. Antonio's fingers found their way along the contours of Eleanor's face just above her jay. The night deepened around them like velvet curtain after an elaborate performance of daylight's fleeting plaything now, but a memory etched behind closed eyelids, as twilight held caught over the horizon with gentle authority, beckoning onlookers into its realm where shadows danced to fading echoes. Eleanor's fingers traced softly along Antonio's cheek. This simple act was their silent language of affection, or tender reminder that love does not falter nor fade as the seasons cycle through time like an unending waltz beneath the moonlit sky. Within these hallowed grounds, where nature had etched its own history with roots and leaves upon stone pathways worn by lovers' hurried footsteps, now muted in memory's embraced pair felt a comforting weight of continuity as if their very souls were the custodians entrusted to care for this sacred place. It was here, within these enduring walls, where love once bloomed like night-blooming jasmine amidst moonlit whispers and sighs that could rustle leaves into melodies at midnight, that Antonio knelt beside Aline's side as she drifted further into the realm of dreams. Underneath, a sky painted in hues borrowed from an artist's palette, where each star seemed meticulously placed to compose celestial sonnets across infinity itself, Antonio whispered her name like incantations that summoned visions only the heart could see as they journeyed through his fingers. The night air carried their unspoken promises on currents of warmth, and Antonio's hands found solace in tracing hers atop a blanket damp with dour tactile testament to love's resilience against time's relentless march forward, like an ancient oak standing steadfast through countless autumnal farewells. The garden itself, which had cradled their first meeting and witnessed the birth of every tender moment shared between them, now seemed imbued with a vitality that pulsed from its very soil to nurture dreams yet unborn within Antonio's soulful gaze upon Alina. It was as though an ethereal thread linked all past loves and joys encapsulated in the garden's heart, where every bloom held memories of whispered confessions. Each droplet atop a leaf mirrored teardrops shed for moments lost to time, and here they sat again upon this same bench that had once been their first rendezvous. As night unfurled its darkened wings and embraced the world in silence, Antonio's fingers glided along Alina's skin with reverent touches. He felt her pulse quicken as if each beat was a note played on strings of desire, their shared heartbeat now an echo resonating through eternity. And just when they thought their journey had reached its zenith, the garden seemed to hum alive under this very starlight that veiled them in secrecy, for within these sacred halls where dreams were birthed and cradled until morning's lighter gentle rustling of leaves signaled a presence yet unknown, their shared whispers melted into the chorus of night sounds, harmonizing with distant callings from nocturnal creatures that reveled in their clandestine symphony. As Antonio and Alina exchanged stolen glances beneath ancient branches laden heavy with secrets, her presence began to emerge. It was a stranger drawn by the timeless resonance of love's own frequency, unknowingly guided through an invisible thread that wove itself between their souls like roots seeking water in dry soil as they sought refuge under elm and oak alike. Within this garden where dreams were both cocooned and cradled, her new heartbeat joined the eternal dance. Beneath a canopy of whispering leaves that spoke secrets older than time itself, Antonio found himself captivated by an enigmatic stranger whose gaze mirrored his own yearning soul. As if they had known each other, the stranger watched them from beneath bushy brows furrowed like ancient scripts, contemplating a future where love transcended time and space within this hidden garden of dreams. Their lips moved without sound as they traced the air with imagined words that spoke only to Antonio's heart, a tender script he was still learning how to read in himself. As if sensing his thoughts, Alina's own shadow brushed against him lightly and playfully. Their hands met momentarily before separating, as though afraid of the intimacy it might invoke within them both. The stranger's name seemed etched onto Antonio's lips by some arcane connection or melody he had heard in dreams, but which no living soul knew save for this night, and perhaps a long-forgotten past where his own heart beat to the same rhythm as Alina's. Antonio found himself entranced not just by her form or touch, but rather an ethereal quality that seemed woven into every thread of life within these sacred halls. Her presence felt deep in bones and stirred like dormant seeds beneath the soil's surface longing for sunlight. The stranger was a mirror to his soul. Their eyes held galaxies he had traversed through dreamscapes alone, now gazing back at him with recognition that defied explanation but promised revelation nonetheless. The night advanced, as if reluctant to part ways with its secrets, until Antonio felt an intrinsic pull towards the stranger, a force so primal and unyielding he knew it must be love, yet understood not how nor where this emotion had begun for either of them within their shared history. His mind raced through possibilities as his heart whispered truths, only now discovered in that singular moment, when time seemed to fold upon itself like the petals of a flower blooming at midnight under starlight's tender caress. The stranger turned towards Antonio, her expression one of quiet understanding, her knowing smile touching lips which had never kissed another save for Alina's own cherished ones. She spoke words that seemed to weave themselves from the night itself, each syllable a delicate thread in an invisible tapestry only they could see and feel, binding them with silken strands of shared destiny amidst whispers carried on breezes born beneath ancient oaks, as if breathing life into Antonio's own heartbeat. "You seek solace here within my shadow," she murmured in a voice that hummed like an age-old lullaby, her words resonating with the frequencies of their intertwined souls, for it was not merely this garden, but also space and time itself, which had cradled them both until now. "I am no stranger to your heart's silent song for once, upon a dreamture. I shared its refrain." Antonio, bewitched by her presence that seemed as natural yet otherworldly in the moonlight-drenched garden of their youthful escapades and unspoken love affairs with Elena always at his side. In this Zero-Attic stranger's company was Antonio learning to navigate not just a physical realm, but also terrains within himself that had long remained shrouded in mystery, a journey he felt compelled to undertake, despite knowing the risk of waking into sunlight with more questions than answers and perhaps even fear. Together they whispered secrets once kept only for themselves beneath a tapestry of leaves rustling like soft fabric on an unseen breeze, tales that transcended ordinary human experience, where love was not just felt, but live of force as elemental to their being as the very air and water which quenched thirst with the mishallowed ground. It became apparent with each shared glance between Antonio and Elena's unseen companion that she had been a spectre in his past life. Her presence here was no mere chance encounter, but rather an intricate dance choreographed by the threads of fate itself, or destiny entwined like ivy around ancient walls, as Antonio and Elena sat ensconced in a circle of ancient oaks that whispered secrets older than time. They felt as if their souls were being scribed onto an eternal parchment by fingertips softer than down feathers from the night's breath. The moonlight played tricks on Antonio's mind, her silver thread weaver creating patterns of what could have been and might yet be, under a sky now just beginning to blush with dawn. Their shared companion faded into silence, as if acknowledging their inner turmoil. The very stars seemed to pulse in time with Antonio's heartbeat, or sonorous rhythm that spoke of unfulfilled longings and tender vulnerabilities, each throb a note within an unsung lullaby. Elena's hand found his as it rested on her knee, warmth seeping into him like the gentle touch of morning dew upon parched soil, or promise of life amidst uncertainty's relentless march. "What if this is all but a dream?" Antonio whispered to Elena, an admission hanging between them as palpable as mist on cobblestones, yet they dared not break the silence that had become their shared language of love and fear, a dialect learned in moonlit sighs. Elena's gaze lingered upon Antonio's face long after his breath caught within him like a butterfly trapped between realms. Her eyes held galaxies, yet they mirrored the tranquility one finds at water's surface storm despite tempests raging unseen beneath. "Do you believe in destiny?" she queried softly, as if to conjure courage from his own uncertainty, a question not meant for answer, but simply posed like an offering upon their sacred altar of companionship and quiet revelations. "It is strange," Antonio conceded with the weighty acceptance that comes when one learns too much about oneself yet understands so little, a reflection on love's mirror, wherein truth becomes as elusive as shadows at dusk. "We have danced upon a stage set by fate's hand, every step choreographed to music we cannot hear." Their discourse meandered through the paths of what was and might yet be an exploration into each other's souls, where questions were not asked but felt, as if sensing ripples in a pond's heart. Antonio recounted stories from his past, tales spun with threads both golden and dark, memories that painted him less of the man he had been and more who might yet become beneath Elena's touch or within her embrace, each narrative thread woven into an intricate tapestry as complex as life itself. "Do you think I am brave?" Antonio asked himself aloud, his voice a mere whisper among the leaves that cradled them like protective arms of green and brown. "Braver now for having loved, though it has cost me much." Elena's response came not in words, but through her steady presence, her balm-soothing wounds inflicted by time's unforgiving passage. She was the healer whose salve comes from simply being beside him when others might turn away. The night deepened, and with each shared breath they surrendered to a fear that held them in thrall. What if their journey through this garden of dreams led but further into enigma? Yet, even as uncertainty's spectre loomed before Antonio's soul-weary eyes, the strength within him found solace not despite Elena's presence but because. In her company his heart learned to beat in a rhythm that was both hopeful and resilient. It echoed through valleys of trepidation with fortitude born from shared silence too sacred for words alone to encapsulate. As Dorn threatened the knight's domain, Antonio felt as if he had journeyed not across miles, but within himself a pilgrimage that brought him face to face with a part of Alina's essence entwined in his own spirit like roots intertwining beneath earthy beds. Love was their shared inheritance and burden. It coursed through them as the heartbeat of two souls merging, separate once upon times, beginning but now indivisible, by choice or circumstance or confluence, where destinies had converged like rivers finding one vast oceanic embrace. And so they sat together in companionable contemplation until sleep claimed them with the gentleness of a lover's touch, their joined hands resting upon an unconscious form as if it were another part of as Antonio and Alina sat beneath the canopy of stars that night or tapestry woven with silver threads, their hands clasped together found solace in each other's warmth after a day spent exploring not just distant lands, but also hidden chambers within themselves. The garden they had traversed through dream and reality seemed to draw them closer as the gentle hum of shared breath became like an unspoken promise whispering between their lips. In this sacred space, where shadows danced with light and time held no dominion over heartbeats that synced in tender cadence against Alina's chest, Antonio felt a peace he had never known, a tranquillity born from her gentle gaze that saw all his fears laid bare. And it was here, amidst the verdant hues of this ethereal place, where no footfall dared disturb its restful quietude, they found themselves not as travelers, but guardians of a bond neither fully comprehended nor entirely desired to release into uncertainty's grasp. Their journey had been punctuated by encounters that tested the very essence of trust and vulnerability, shimmering fae who danced on dewdrops, ancient trees murmuring secrets in a language not spoken for centuries, creatures with eyes like molten gold reflecting wisdom beyond their years. Each step forward had been taken hand in hand. Every shared silence was filled with unvoiced truths and tender revelations that seemed to echo from the very heart of nature itself. As Dorn's first light began to brush against Antonio's skin, he knew this pilgrimage through dreamscapes and self had revealed much more than mere paths between 2 points on a map. It illuminated an uncharted terrain within their souls that was as profoundly beautiful as it was daunting. There were questions left hanging like dew upon the newborn leaves, but they found comfort in knowing each answer lay not just ahead of them now bathed in daylight's embrace, but also nestled deep inside, where love had entwined their essences without question or qualm, or shared inheritance, as much an endowment from fate's unpredictable hand. Alina too felt the morning air wrap around her like a cloak woven with threads of gold and azure hues, carrying whispers of nighttime confessions that had been entrusted to no one but themselves within these mystical bounds. As she nestled closer into Antonio's side in their shared repose upon an unconscious former being neither animal nor humanity so clearly defined by the rigid classifications they knew too well, yet bearing a kinship with both as though it were its own rightful domain, she realized that love had not just been discovered, but also bestowed. Their journey through dreams and reality was now imprinted upon their very being, like footsteps in wet clay. Each moment shared became part of the landscape they traveled on when awake. They were no longer simply lovers who sought adventures toward. They had become companions to one another's spirit, with a depth that promised endless horizons ahead and mysteries untold within themselves waiting patiently for exploration under starlit skies or sun-kissed meadows alike. It was as if the garden of dreams they wandered through every night had, in fact, been their own hearts, or vibrant labyrinth where paths intertwined and bloomed with possibilities that defied expectation's grasp, while offering solace to those who sought refuge from life's relentless pace. With each shared breath came the reassurance of a love both timeless and tender, as if they had already been together across ages in this very same garden where now their souls were irrevocably interlaced with promises that neither time nor distance could ever fray, a bond sealed not by fate alone, but also by choice's steadfast hand. And so beneath the watchful gaze of constellations who had once guided ancient mariners and whispered secrets to sages, Antonio and Alina found a haven where love was their compass and each other's presence an anchor against life's tempests, or sanctuary not just for themselves, but as well. For even if the journey ahead held unknown turns on roads untraveled, or paths yet woven from dream into reality, They would face them with hearts entwined in a dance of courage and vulnerability that only love could inspire, their shared essence becoming one with each other like roots finding sustenance beneath fertile soil. As the first rays of sunlight crept along horizon's edge to banish nights, as morning dew settled on emerald leaves and delicate petals alike in their enchanted garden of eternal blossoms, Antonio would often find himself gazing at Alina with eyes reflective as pools under moonlight's caress eyes that held a universe within them. As the first light began to break free from night's firm grasp and dance upon nature in hues both fierce and gentle, he felt his heart swell like bellows, drawing breath into an eager flame of passion beneath their shared skyward gaze. In this very moment, Antonio realized that love was not a mere whisper between the rustling leaves, but also echoed within him a symphony composed by every soul-to-soul connection ever formed in existence's grand tapestry. And Alina had become his most cherished melody to which he could sway. This garden, with its labyrinthine paths, where flowers bloomed like stars against the velvet backdrop of night, bore witness not only to their union, but also stood as a testament that love knows no era or expanse, if that it is both an evergreen and eternal entity within which they found themselves immersed. Their footsteps were silent upon the moss-covered cobblestones of this timeless place, leaving behind not even a whisper in their wake, as if every sound had already been absorbed by ancient stones that held stories older than time itself, a resonance only found within these sacred grounds. Antonio traced his fingertips along the contours of Alina's face with reverence for her features, each one more ethereal and delicate like sculptures wrought from moonbeams themselves. In their skin was a touch that spoke not just to beauty but also resonated with strength, resilience born through years shared within this very garden. Together they walked towards the heart of the labyrinth, where paths converged and intertwined into endless possibilities like cosmic strings weaving fate's grand design. Here was their haven nestled between whispers of time that sought to pull them asunder, but instead found themselves fused inseparably with promises deep-rooted. The air held a scent, not entirely earthly, it seemed in essence born from the very love they shared, wove through it like threads binding two souls together into one intricate tapestry of existence. Their presence here was as ordained by celestial beings and terrestrial elements alike. Antonio paused beside Alina, taking her hand in his own, a gesture that seemed simple yet held immeasurable depths within its simplicity, for it spoke volumes about the trust they had cultivated over a lifetime of shared experiences. He whispered words not spoken too loudly lest intruders from realms less kind should eavesdrop upon their sacred communion. "Alina, our love is like this garden, timeless and ever-growing," Antonio murmured, as if his voice itself was an extension of the verdant soundscape surrounding them. Alina's response came not in words, but through a gaze imbued with shared understanding that transcended language. As they ventured deeper into their beloved sanctuary, where nightshade mingled freely amongst blooms and even shadows seemed to pause, as if basking beneath the weight of two hearts united in purpose beyond mere affection, the pair approached a clearing encircled by ancient oaks whose leaves had whispered secrets since time immemorial. Here stood their favorite tree, its gnarly roots having entwined with countless others over centuries to form an intertwining forest of life's continuance. It was here that Antonio would often confess his deepest fears and hopes, or safe haven for vulnerability within the embrace of nature. Within this sacred space, Alina knelt down beside him, not as a lover, but rather as an equal companion embarking on journeys through life's unpredictable terrain. Together they faced their future with eyes alight and hearts daring to dream beyond horizons, or partnership built upon trust, understanding, and the courageous embrace of shared vulnerability. As Antonio began speaking softly about his aspirations for them both in this world outside these enchanted bounds, as well as within its unseen depths that echoed with their laughter or mournful, Alina listened intently to every word, her heart a vessel brimming over and ready to overflow into the open arms of his ambitions. Their conversations would often stretch late into night's embrace as stars twinkled like distant lighthouses, guiding sailors through tempestuous seas. Alina's voice, as chapter 19 faded into memory like a gentle mist at dawn's first light, Antonio and Alina found themselves seated on their usual bench underneath that same cherished tree where countless seasons had whispered wisdom through rustling leaves above them, a living testament to endurance. The world around seemed almost asleep too, the once vibrant hues of twilight now dulling into a monochrome palette, suitable for dreams and stories, shared between two souls intertwined in more than just affection but also mutual ambition that even fate itself couldn't ignore. One day Antonio began, his voice almost tender with the weight of unspoken thoughts hanging heavily upon him like dew on morning grasses after a nighttime rainstorm. We might find ourselves journeying to lands where these ancient oaks are but myths, places that seem as foreign and distant from us here. Eleanor's eyes reflected his vision. They were filled with the same spark of wonder, yet also echoed her own internal musings on their impending departure. With a sigh, Antonio leaned in closer to whisper into the space between the Mass-Sacred Communion, where words carried not only meaning but emotion too raw for even love itself could bear alone, without fearing its vulnerability might fracture beneath the weight of expectation and dreams unmet. "I've always wanted our story beyond these shores, Eleanor," he confided with a hopeful tremble in his voice that seemed to carry all their shared futures within it like stars scattered across an open sky, or plea for trust as vast and deep as the ocean itself, where countless stories were born. Elena clasped her hands together, feeling them grow warm against Antonio's cool skin beneath a tapestry of ivy that seemed to hold their world in its embrace. "And I want nothing less than our story," she replied with conviction, and eyes alight with the same fire as his own, a reflection mirroring an unquenchable desire for life, lived fully, daringly beyond what any one soul could dream alone without another's heart to share its burden. Their conversation meandered through possibilities of new landscapes and cultures they might encounter on their travels, while still carrying the essence of home in every shared memory, as if these experiences, too precious for just them but needing no audience beyond each other's understanding gaze, to be cherished forever. Antonio spoke softly about languages he hoped one day to learn, not as mere tools for communication, but rather a means through which souls might connect across the vast expanse of humanity, a bridge between hearts and minds built upon respect, curiosity, and kindness that transcended geographic boundaries or time itself. Elena listened intently to every word. Her heart felt fuller by their exchange, as if each shared dream were a vessel pouring its contents into the open arms of Antonio's ambitions, a reservoir brimming with aspirations for both personal growth and communal harmony that they would weave together like strands in an unbreakable rope. Their conversations often stretched late into night as stars twinkled above them, silent witnesses to the depth of their connection, while moonlight bathed the forest floor below, a living tableau where every leaf and blade whispered stories only they could truly hear, within themselves alone, but also shared with one another in quiet moments like these. Antonio's voice lowered as he spoke next, his words almost a prayer that their bond would continue to flourish amidst the uncertainties of an ever-changing world, or testament not just for them both but perhaps even beyond, into lives yet touched by love and understanding despite trials or tribulations no one could predict. "Elena," he began, his voice quivering with emotion as tender as a lover's caress upon the cheek of trust itself that had grown between their souls over countless shared moments like these, "I want to be strong for us both in whatever comes our way." Her heart responded instantaneously, swelling within her chest with gratitude not only for Antonio's commitment, but also because she knew without question that he had always been there just as steadfast and supportive whenever strength seemed scarce or doubt threatened their united path. Elena reached out to touch his hand gently, her silent assurance of shared resolve in the face of whatever lay ahead, knowing they would encounter not only challenges but also triumphs together too bright for any one individual's eyes alone could behold, without sharing its radiance with another whose heart beat as fervently and faithfully beside their own. As night deepened into, as Antonio's voice lowered and his words danced with a tenderness that seemed to weave itself into her very being, Elena felt as though she was standing on solid ground once more within their love for each other rather than upon the unpredictable waves of life outside. Their shared glance spoke volumes. It carried the weight of countless goodbyes and hellos they had bid one another within these walls that now seemed to shrink around them as if in reverence, holding only Antonio's embrace or warmth against her skin too gentle for any but this moment could provide. Antonio took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs before he released it like an artist summoning color from paint on canvas. The last of their day was spent in silence as they sat by Elena's bedside, Her tired eyes often met Antonio's with gratitude that needed no words for its expression. Her heartfelt "thank you" whispered through the sigh between them, a reassurance echoing within his chest. And now he looked at Alina as she drifted in and out of sleep beneath the quilt they had made together years ago, when first love bloomed under their carefree gaze, her patchwork of hopeful dreams stitched with threads both golden and silver, a testament to promises tenderly murmured into the night. He longed for nothing more than her warmth against his own as he watched over her now fragile form. Each beat seemed louder in its fading echoes, crescendo of their shared existence reaching an unforeseen climax, a denouement written not with pen or brush but between two hearts intertwined. Eleanor's hand lay still against his chest as he held her close. The last vestiges of fear that had once gnawed at him like starving wolves faded into nothingness there. Love, a beacon too bright to dim even under skies overcast with thunderheads or beneath moons obscured by passing clouds. His heart ached for them both as they faced the inevitable. Time was their relentless taskmaster that neither could escape nor deny its passage, ceaseless river flowing forward, untouchable and imperious despite his yearning to hold it back or let her slip through like sand running down an hourglass. He whispered a silent prayer for strength, not from himself, but as if he was calling upon the very earth beneath them, roots that ran deep into each other's souls, binding their essence together in ways neither could fathom. Or love so pure and profound it seemed to transcend physical form. Antonio's thoughts drifted back to days of yore when laughter echoed through halls now dust-laden with memories, each shared smile a seed planting itself firmly into the fertile soil that was their connection, growth unstoppable in its natural course, blooming forth despite seasons they could not predict nor control. Eleanor's breath grew shallower as she succumbed to sleep's seductive call. Her form relaxed and sank into the bedding beneath them like a leaf returning gently upon still waters at daybreak, her presence an anchor in his heart when he might otherwise fear for their future. His thoughts were not of worry, but instead filled with quiet confidence that they had each other to lean on as life's unpredictable tempests raged. Love was the lighthouse guiding them through squalls and gales, a like-air beacon offering solace amidst storm-tossed seas where lesser vessels might falter or flounder. Antonio closed his eyes, basking in a tranquillity that seemed to envelop him entirely, as if he were swathed within the comforts of their home itself, for warmth unyielding even against life's coldest winters. Love was an eternal summer for two hearts beating defiantly amidst tempests, each beat echoing a promise too profound to falter in its cadence. And as night deepened into the embrace of darkness, that promised rest and renewal, their bond remained unbroken by time or trials. They were but wayfarers on life's grand tapestry, where every thread spun from their union wove patterns too intricate to fathom, yet undeniably beautiful in its existence. The gentle hum of the night was punctuated only by the soft exhalations between the mass symphony composed not with instruments or notes, but born out of two souls interlocked within a single melody that resonated through their shared journey. Antonio's lips found Alina. The night had deepened into a velvet blanket that stretched endlessly across the sky as Antonio and Alina found themselves in another one of life's tender nocturnes, or time, when their souls whispered secrets only they could understand, sharing silent sonnets with each other. The moon was but an observer from afar, casting a silver hue that danced upon the waves like tiny reflections caught up in love's embrace. Antonio's heart had been steadied by Alina. His fear of life without her seemed as distant to him now as those far-off stars twinkling mischievously above them on this night, when they were but two souls basking under a canopy of dreams and shared glances. Their fingers brushed in the darkness, an intimate touch that told stories too profound for words or language, born from trust and unspoken vows between their hearts beating as one against life's relentless currents. As they lay side by side on a blanket nestled amidst emerald blades of grass in the warmth of Alina's backyard, an ancient oak stood sentinel overhead, its leaves whispering tales to anyone who would listen. But tonight was not for observers or storytellers. Instead, Antonio and Alina were custodians of their own narrative amidst life's relentless tempests, where lesser vessels might falter under the weight of love's burden. He felt her hand against his cheek, her touch that spoke volumes in its tenderness, as they shared a final, lingering kiss beneath the watchful eyes of fireflies painting constellations upon their own private night sky. It was here, Within this hallowed ground, where love had rooted itself deeply and withstood seasons both harsh and mild, Antonio realized that fears could not unravel them as long as they held on to one another like a lighthouse guiding ships through the stormy waters of existence, their beacon offering solace amidst squalls, their bond too intricate for any soul other than two hearts interlocked in trust and eternal summer. And yet, despite the serenity that settled upon them with night's advance, Antonio knew there were more chapters ahead, where they would face tempests, unknown, a journey without a map but guided by love's unwavering light, which promised to lead even when shadows grew long and uncertainty loomed near. He closed his eyes not out of fear for the coming dawn or its revelations, but with reverence that each sunset was an ode to their shared history, a reminder of all they had weathered together as one soul in two bodies against life's capricious whims and fancies. As Antonio drifted into sleep's embrace under the silent vigilance of Alina, who remained awake a little longer by his side before yielding to her own bedtime ritual or cup of chamomile tea she brewed with hands that had learned love's craftsmanship through years spent weaving dreams and comfort into every set. It was in the quiet afterglow, as daylight began its retreat behind a curtain drawn by night's own hand. Their whispers of good night were not merely words, but vows spoken with lips sealed or promised to return each dawn stronger for having braved another evening together entwined. Alina had always been his steadfast anchor, her laughter as timeless a melody in the concert hall that was Antonio's mind. Their love transcended mere emotion and became an anthem sung by two souls who found harmony within each other's ice or symphony composed not with instruments or notes, but born out of interlocked fates. As she nestled beneath her quilt, a simple patchwork that bore witness to years of shared experiences stitched together in love's tender embrace, the world around them ceased its relentless march as if taking cue from their hearts. Beat her tempo synchronized with promises and dreams unspoken yet understood. Throughout this night, Antonio would find himself swathed within a tranquility so potent it seemed to render time's passage inconsequential against the warmth of Alina at his side. Her presence was as constant in its constancy or comforting flame that never wavered even when winds sought to extinguish. And though tomorrow might bring gales and stormy seas, he knew with every fibre of being they were not alone on life's grand tapestry where their union had spun threads too intricate for any but the most discerning eyes. Antonio had always known the strength he drew forth at night was intertwined with Alina's soulful presence. Their dream-laden sighs were like lullabies that rocked him into a serene stupor, her innocent snores echoing through chambers of his heart. The symphony crafted between them transcended the mundane. It was an ethereal harmony, where every note played upon their strings resonated with shared vulnerability and strength, a melody woven from threads unseen, but felt in tender moments when eyes met across a wooden table, or fingers brushed as they traced each other's face under the warmth of candlelight. As time spiraled into infinity within this cocoon of tranquility and love, Antonio would often find himself lost to an internal reverie wherein he could almost hear Alina's laughter, a timeless echo that hummed along with his own heartbeat in a duet untouched by the passage of seasons. The night whispered secrets through her eyelashes, and she was there always, present as much when sleep eluded him during storm-ridden days spent together huddled over books or candles flickering against leather-bound tomes that told tales older than time itself, her eyes glinting with the same starlight they now shared. Tonight Antonio's thoughts strayed not to fear, but gratitude for their unyielding bond as he watched Alina drift into dreamland, her breath steady and lullaby-like in its rhythm that seemed eternal, or testament to the enduring nature of true love. It was within this sacred space between them where they had learned life's tender lessons, forged by trials faced together under a relentless sun or amidst tempest's fury. Every shared hardship and fleeting joy were seared into their being, a narrative no chronicle could encapsulate nor memory dilute. Their story was like ancient tapestry that told of love not just endured, but reborn with each dawn, renewing itself in the sanctity they found within one another's gaze and gentle touch, a tale as old as time, yet unrivaled by any legend penned or sung. Antonio's spirit felt lighter, as though he could carry her across oceans of stars with but an armful, for she was his anchor in the vast unknown that lay ahead beyond their doorstep, and into tomorrow's embrace, where love remained undiminished by fear. In this secluded corner of existence they had built Toad for a world within a room painted in shades, only dreamed about on canvas, but felt beneath fingertips their union stood as an indomitable fortress against life's relentless siege. And Antonio knew that no matter what storm or shadow may come to pass outside their hearth, they were not alone upon the grand tapestry of existence, where threads intertwined in patterns too intricate for any soul save the Mac constellation, only they could navigate with unwar zero-bedded certainty, guided by love's lighthouse beacon, its glow steady and true as Aliner's heart. And so Antonio closed his eyes to rest, until the sun would once again draw back the curtain of night, or new day dawning on him with promises renewed. A fresh chapter awaiting in life's unfoldment, where he knew love was not just their anthem, but also an everlasting echo that traveled through time's corridor to touch those who had yet to encounter this magical resonance. As the first light of dawn tiptoed across his face and kissed away nighttime's last shadow from Aliner's peaceful slumber, Antonio whispered a silent vow or pledge that whatever tomorrow held for them would merely be another verse in their never-ending song, where love was both melody and muse. With every beat of his heart he felt the rhythm of this shared existence. With every breath she took beside him under morning's gentle gaze, as Antonio lay in bed beside Alina, their breaths mingling softly like two gentle streams converging into one underneath a canopy of darkness, now being replaced by tender tendrils of morning light filtering through his window curtains. He felt an unspoken warmth wrap around him. This was the comfort that came with knowing they were safe and secure within each other's embrace or sanctuary, where no tempests could shake their foundation or fearsome creatures invade to disturb their peaceful repose. He nestled closer, his fingers finding Aliner's hands wrapped around the back of her knees as if they were cradling a newborn bird that had just learned how to flutter on its own delicate wings. And perhaps it was not so far-fetched, because love did give them both this gift. Antonio and Alina, with their intertwined destinies painted upon life's vast canvas, stood as proof of the extraordinary power held within a simple embrace between two souls destined to meet under fate's watchful eye. They were each other's anchor in an ocean too wide for one lone heart. Alina stirred softly beside him, and her eyes fluttered upon a silent acknowledgment of the time slipping away, a promise that as sunlight continued its relentless march across their shared horizon, it would soon be his turn to join this dance with daybreak's embrace once more. She turned towards Antonio's face reflected on hers, and there was an understanding in her gaze, a recognition of the unspoken covenant they had forged amid life's myriad terms, a silent symphony that played out within their intertwined fingers, under this ever-watchful eye. The first light caressed Antonio's sleeping form like an artist reassuring his masterpiece with strokes of gold and amber, as Alina whispered in the sultry tone reserved for secrets shared at twilights, and that tender melody that only they could hear. "I thought I heard it," she murmured, her voice a gentle breeze rustling through leaves on an autumnal eve. Antonio smiled faintly beneath his pillow as the memory of their previous night's encounter with laughter-soaked revelry and passionate embraces blossomed within him. "I heard it too," he replied, tracing her face in sleep's tender glow that made shadows dance like playful sprites around them. His heart echoed a rhythm so pure, a harmonious cadence composed solely of their love's essence, which surged within him with each beat. As the world beyond woke to find itself enveloped in daylight's renewing touch, Antonio whispered another silent vow into Alina's ear before she even stirred, fully awake, or promise that wherever they might travel on this journey of life together, love would always be their guiding star and companion through the ebb and flow of time. Their shared dream continued as a tapestry woven from threads both fragile and strong. Alina's spirit soared with visions of future's untolder world, where Antonio's touch brought solace to those in need, his heart an unending wellspring of compassion that quenched the deepest thirst for connection. And as she dreamed of their potential paths together and apart, yet always intertwined by fate's invisible threads, Alina found comfort knowing her love was not just a singular melody strung upon life's instrument, but an ever-expanding chorus that resounded through time itself, a perpetual echo etched into the very essence of existence. As Antonio finally succumbed to sleep's embrace, he envisioned himself walking hand in hand with Alina along cobblestone streets leading them towards unknown horizons, where each step together was a note upon life's symphonic manuscript. And as the sun ascended high into its midday throne above their heads, Antonio knew that the chapters of adventure awaited beyond tomorrow's horizontes were but fleeting verses in an epic love story orphaned by destiny itself, with a final sigh steeped with the essence of unconditional devotion and serene anticipation. Antonio closed his eyes to dream once more. Each vision painted upon slumber's canvas was infused with hues that spoke not only of joy, but also of resilience in their shared existence. For amidst all life's trials, sure as the North Star remains a steadfast sentinel within an indigo sky, Antonio and Elinor would find love to his dawn's first light kissed his cheeks and painted them a rosy hue that was foreign to Antonio. He stirred from slumber with an uncharacteristic sense of clarity or premonition whispering through him like morning breeze rustling leaves. The night had been tender in its embrace, but as the sun climbed towards promise and painted horizons a bright cerulean blue beyond their quaint cottage window pane, Antonio felt an unfamiliar weight upon his chest or burden of anticipation that spoke not only to love's eternal dance with time, but also to its potential for transformation. Antonio wandered into the kitchen, where Elena awaited him, her presence a warm hearth in contrast to morning's cool touch. Her laughter filled their home like sunlight streaming through leaves or sound. Antonio found himself returning to more and more as he awakened his senses, each day with her at his side. Today was no different. Eleanor's fingers wrapped around the back of his neck, pulling him closer in a silent pact that only they understood. This morning held whispers of change on its breath. "Let us not speak before we taste," she suggested gently as Antonio eyed her copper simple porcelain vessel cradling within it steaming chamomile and honey, the kind their mother used to brew when they were children in a different world altogether. He nodded, already knowing that with Eleanor's touch came not only comfort, but revelations whispered on steamy lips of teacups long forgotten by time's indifferent hand. As Antonio sipped and savored the bittersweet blend, taste reminiscent yet foreign as their own love story unfolding in its infancy, he shared with Elinor a dream that had fluttered into his heart like an unexpected butterfly amidst daisies. She might soon be called away to distant lands for reasons unknown. A journey of necessity or desire, Antonio could never tell. All he knew was the sudden sense of urgency pressing upon their quiet existence, as if life itself were quickening its pulse with each second passing under the sun's watchful gaze. Elinor took his hand in hers and met her eyes that mirrored worry interlaced with lover-knotted tapestry reflective of many years together yet untouchable by time's relentless march forward. "We are but wayfarers on this earthly plain, seeking warmth within each other's embrace," she mused aloud as if her words were already sewn into the fabric of their shared history, a tapestry woven with golden threads that shimmered under Antonio's touch and held fast by Eleanor's own. They spent hours in conversation, a dance between spoken word and silent understanding, where memories acted not just as echoes but as seeds for growth. Each anecdote shared was like watering the garden of their future with experiences richly sown within past soil. Antonio dreamt aloud of Eleanor's return to them after her journey, imagining his heart expanding in welcome and wonderment at every new path she might traverse upon this ever-unfolding mat that stretched beyond horizons wide as daybreak's promise held tight against nightfall's tender kiss. As the afternoon waned into a soft twilight glow, Antonio helped Elinor with errands to fortify their bond, or silent pact they shared amidst whispers of love that knew no end and beginnings as numerous as stars nestled in velvet heavens above them all. They visited her mother's favorite bakery, where flour dust danced like snowflakes upon the air, a symphony accompanying each kneaded dough they rolled beneath skilled hands that spoke of generations' worth of recipes passed down through whispers and laughter shared between kin. A reminder Antonio felt within his heart. Life's essence is interwoven with love. Even as the bakery aromas enveloped them, it was when they returned home to their cottage that Elena revealed she had been offered an opportunity for travel and study, a broader chance not just of discovery, but also potential reconnection upon return to her homeland's ancient streets. The news settled between them like leaves after autumn's gust. Antonio felt the stirrings within him akin to seasons shifting, as if winter had taken hold atop his chest in anticipation and hope, same way it cradled their village through cold nights when moonlight was only memory. "I know this change will test our ropes," Elinor said, with the strength. The cottage was awash with golden light as dusk turned into an embrace of warmth and quietude, a perfect setting for introspection that Antonio found himself in more times than not during these evenings spent alone with Helena since her departure to study abroad. The room they shared felt larger, somehow, when the windows were drawn open, just saw a gentle welcome between them, as if acknowledging their solitude was an opportunity rather than confinement, a chance for growth amidst silence and shadowy corners of memories yet unfurling like nocturnal blooms under moonlight. Antonio would trace his fingers along the spines on Elena's bookshelf, her curated collection, that whispered tales from across oceans to her eager heart, each volume a vessel for experiences she dreamt of but had yet to grasp within reality's embrace. In these quiet moments with books as confidants and companions, he often found solace in the fact that love endures beyond words or actions. It lives on through shared tales told under starlit canopies where whispers become wind songs carried by midnight zephyrs. It was during one of such evenings when a peculiar sensation took root within his chest, feeling as if winter itself had cast its frosting over the soil, sealing their affection in crystal and snowflakes to weather until spring's tender thaw could melt away isolation. That night Antonio penned letters he intended for Elena's eyes alone. Each were a petal of his heart blooming on paper, a blizzard within him that promised neither end nor beginning, but an eternal cycle, where they were both the frost and flame intertwined in destiny's dance. As weeks melted into months, Antonio found himself visiting her mother's bakery with regularity, not just as a gesture of support for Elena's absent presence, but to reconnect his spirit back home to the scents and sounds that had so often accompanied their tender evenings. The warmth within these walls was more than comfort from rising oven stones. It bore into him like sunlight through clouds after an endless night, a reminder of life's perpetual seasons, each as inevitable yet precious to cherish and anticipate with reverence for what they bring forth. One day, amidst the soft hum of flour milling around Antonio, his gaze caught something unusual, a single dried flower elegantly perched atop a counter where it seemed no one had disturbed its silent vigil over sweet confections and savory pastries for years. The memory that fluttered within him was not unlike Elena's presence now, an unexpected bloom in the cobwebbed corners of his heart, awakening forgotten fragrances. He yearned to share with her once more, a sensory whisper on a gusty wind promising reconnection and reunion. He left that day not just as patron, but pilgrim. Each step away from the bakery was an echo of his resolve, stepping out into uncertainty yet undeterred by its expanse or how far it might stretch, until Elena's return to their village cocooned within ancient stones. His heart carried a promise's silent vow that when her path intersected with the winding roads back home again and she returned, they would greet each other not just as lovers but also seekers of world's flavors beyond borders. When he finally reached his cottage doorstep under star-dappled skies, where night was painted in hues darker than ever before, yet somehow more radiant, as if the cosmos conspired to cloak their village with deeper love's embrace, felt a comforting certainty that home is not merely a place, but an essence of being, shared between souls. He knocked on her door then and thereafter, as when he had once done for Elena upon learning about the bakery, discovery in his youthful exuberance now rekindled into hope's tender glow that life's most delicious loaves are those yet unbaked, kneaded by hands of time. The village itself seemed to hold its breath as Antonio approached it, her collective pause felt within the walls and whispers among neighbors who had seen his affection bloom for Elena across seasons, both warm and cold, since their first meeting under an autumnal canopy that cradled a young couple's whisper promises. The air carried her laughter, mingling with scents of time from the bakery, where Antonio sought solace in shared memories now tasted by only his senses. As Elena had ventured out into new world, their village was a tapestry interwoven with threads of shared histories and dreams yet unspun, where the bakery's warm scent still lingered on their fingertips, reminding them both that life is but an ephemeral dough to be shaped by hands skilled in love. Antonio knew he would not find Elena at her workbench or among piles of freshly baked goods where she had once been a frequent visitor. Instead, his search led him back through the cobblestone path that looped around their village's heart to this very doorstep under which they first found solace together. Elena was always punctual in her own way, her movements as predictable and comforting as the turning of seasons on an old oak's branches outside Antonio's window, where he now sat patiently with a cup of tea that held more warmth than any fireplace could offer between them. Her laughter was often carried through their village like music to his ears, It had been many moons since the sound resonated within these walls, but today felt as if time itself stood still and listened intently for her voice, waiting with bated breath that seemed almost tangible in its collective presence around them. As Antonio knocked upon Alina's door under a sky awash with stars flickering like the last embers of twilight's dying glower prelude to nightfall, when shadows stretched their arms across every nook and cranny they could hide within, the village held its breath. The air felt charged as if it had been waiting, not just for Antonio's return, but also the chance to whisper sweetly into his soul that Alina was always more than a memory. She lived in him as much as he did her through dreams and echoes of their shared past woven deeply within each heartbeat. The door creaked open, inviting yet timid like morning light hesitant to break upon the world after night's embrace. It was Antonio who stepped into sunlight with a courage that seemed etched in starlight itself. For Alina had always been his North Star, guiding him through life's labyrinths of sweetness and sour, her touch as comforting to his spirit as the warmth from their shared hearth. Their eyes met across Antonio's tableau or picture painted with strokes that only true love could create, where two souls inseparable by affection found solace not just within each other's company, but also beneath skies untouched by time, even as the world spun rapidly on beyond their secluded haven. Here was Alina standing before him now, a vision of strength and beauty that had once inspired Antonio to dream under starlit heavens where promises were whispered between them like sacred oaths pledged beneath ancient boughs, an echo from an autumnal past when the promise of future loomed larger than life itself. Antonio reached for her hand, a gesture smooth as silk and yet imbued with such raw emotion that it seemed to pull at Antonio's very essence. He had not realized how much Alina meant until now how essential she was woven into the fabric of his being like threads in an indestructible cloth. Her fingers found his, a touch as familiar and assuring as home itself after countless nights spent under her watchful gaze through moonlit windows that had become their sanctuary against life's tempests, or haven where they could be each other's refuge amidst the torrents of time. As Antonio spoke words meant to mend and fortify not just his love for Alina, but also reassure her, he shared in dreaming eternally about what lay beyond their village's borders, a world where tastes transcended mere food or drink, a realm of experiences that no earthly flavor could encapsulate as the bakery had once done with its bread, but only love's embrace. Alina listened intently to his promises. Like him,